going to be a bumpy night.
What's going on, guys? This is the Laugh Bunker podcast. Thank you guys all for joining us. My name is Josh and Paul. Great to see you, man.
To be seen.
Yeah. And everything's good with you, though? Everything's all good? I know you've been working, you've been busy. I haven't seen you since the weekend.
Everything is going really well. I mean, had a great time with seeing everybody.
Yeah.
It was phenomenal. Had a great laugh. It was great to see Mo. It was great. A couple people I hadn't seen, Matt and Tomas, so it was very nice to see. It was a great time.
Yeah.
It was great hanging out in your backyard.
Yeah.
The MMA, and it was a good time. The food was killer, and
how many pizzas did you eat?
I only had 2 slices of pizza.
Oh, 2 slices? Okay.
I had 2, but I did have 2 of my cookies. I normally don't eat them. They were pretty tasty. And so I always enjoyed working with Tomas because he just is irreverent and fun and quick.
Yeah.
I never seen him get mad or anything. So
yeah, I never seen him even if he's in a bad mood, it's usually because he's got something else going on. But he when he's around other people, it just goes. He put to the side, and he just he's just his normal self. So that's why I enjoy him.
No, that's why when he would come in and work, I enjoyed it. A lot of the Bell guys, truth is, I loved hanging out there. They were fun and they did a good job, and it was just interesting. They were good people, and they made hot dogs for me.
Yeah.
On my last day in the Bell closet, and the whole lobby reeked like Chicago, and that was just wonderful.
Yeah. So to let everybody know, we hung out Saturday. We had some fights on. We had some pizza, and then we had a lot of old friends come by and who haven't really been around each other in quite some time. So it was pretty good. It was pretty
well, and we had a pre-St. Patrick's Day celebration.
Yes.
The
Jameson and
the Chicago way, of course. Yeah. Yes. And so it was good. And truth is, I had a great time. It's with the whole pandemic, I would have to say that's been the biggest, other than people's unfortunate loss of life or any other tragedy. But it's really, I do miss every once in a while hanging out. It's such a nice mental break. And that's kind of the reason why I wanted to put it together. I was just like, I could have stayed home and just watched it by myself. But I was like, you know what? I haven't seen a lot of these people at once and over, I don't know, maybe quite a while. I haven't seen Matt. I haven't seen Tomas in a year, since last March. And Matt, who had moved on from the location since then, I haven't seen him in a long time. And it's interesting because I already reached out to Rich, so Rich is already on board to help him out. And but I did tell him, I said, listen, man, you got to I'm going to help you out. So I asked him to make a journal for a week of what he's eating, what he's working out, and he's
a skinny guy.
Well, he's skinny, and he's got to put some size on. But the truth is, me and Rich trained a couple other people for West Point, and they were the sons of one of the head sheriff guys in LA here. And I told him I would help him out. And the truth is, I always enjoyed working with him. He's a solid young man, and you could rely on him.
Yeah, you could rely on him. Quick, really kind. And
he laughed at bad jokes, which was really, that's a big plus for me because if you're not going to laugh, I can't work with you.
Yeah, but I haven't had that many people around at once in quite a while, and lately it's been one or two. You've come over, but it's usually been one or two.
I'm only allowed to come over once, every 6 weeks, because of the recovery.
Yeah.
No, for you, for you, not me.
So it's been over 6 months for me having that amount of people, I think, in my house. And it wasn't a large group. It was how many, maybe 6 people, something like that. 6 or 7.
Well, your backyard it's one of my, okay. I like a lot of what I love about it. You could do I think you can have football in the back other half. But anyway, plus whoever did that, these were party people, because the way everything is set up, it's really nice. You're very blessed that your son has that big area to just hang out and do whatever.
Yeah, it's a decent sized backyard. It got some trees, and it's the high walls, and Yeah, the kitchen.
Maybe it was a
and-
prison beforehand.
Yeah.
You didn't know that's where they fed the
Yeah.
convicts.
It's a perfect hosting house, and
It is,
they've
and the
only been here
truth
for
is,
about a
the
year.
kitchen, the house is set up spectacular with the
Yeah.
kitchen. As a person who cooks, the layout is incredible, and then
Yeah.
to be able to have the door wall and that inside area that you can do whatever,
Yeah.
plus the bathroom out in that. It's just really, it was thought out by someone who entertains, no doubt about it.
Because we rent this place, so the owner of the house, and I think the way he had it set up, he seemed like that kind of guy, older Asian man, but he was very like, he's like, oh, this was a hangout room, this is like the socializing room. So I think he had it in mind. He's that type of person who would like to have friends over. So
Well, it's very Midwest,
yeah.
and you don't see that, in. It's interesting when I go back to Chicago and I hang out with old friends from the
Mhm.
80s, and you're hanging out in their backyards and you're having a barbecue. And I remember that's just how I grew up in the
Yeah.
Midwest. It's not, people go to parks here more than having parties at their houses. It's
Yeah,
just a
yeah.
different situation. So it was really a good time. And the fight was, I don't really remember much about the fight, to be honest with you, but
Me neither. I had to rewatch it. I rewatched it because I was like, you know what? I have no idea what the heck happened in most of this stuff.
But I am going to go ahead, and you did send me the list, and some of those names, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I know those names because
Yeah.
that's when it was first a transition, and it was a different game. As basketball is a different game, and
Yeah.
as
Those are fairly like newer to mid generation because the sport's been around for maybe 30 years. So these guys are probably in the last like 10 or so years that I sent you.
But no, these are names that I know of.
Yeah.
And so, but it's interesting because I
Did you happen to catch any of them? Did you watch any of them?
no, I didn't watch anything yet.
I would recommend the George St. Pierre one because that one, the others are just highlights, but that one has a little bit more of like
okay, let me ask this question. Can you recommend a documentary or a journalistic piece that's visual, media at least with some sort of film that can explain the development of MMA? Like I'm historically as a person, I'm interested to know where the transition came between kickboxing and Muay Thai, what brought it in. And if you have a suggestion, not only will we'll put up on the Instagram, but also that's what I really want to see before I move on to see.
That's what I tried to find for you. The best one I found that would give you that kind of early to mid 90s era was the Hickson Gracie documentary Choke.
Okay.
That one shows you because he's probably known as the most successful, tougher Gracie, especially early in.
I'm familiar with the name. I've heard the name before.
Yeah, so he his documentary gives you a really good background on how the early days were, I think it might even have been pre-UFC. So that's a really good documentary. I was trying to find you because UFC and Fox Sports came out with these like mini documentaries. I sent one of them to you. It was the Ken Shamrock documentary.
Okay, yeah,
that one is
that's another name that was in Brock Lesnar.
Huge.
All these names I'm very familiar with, and De Silva, because it seemed like, as with boxing, it was not as expansive. And so in other words, the people who were at the top, you knew their names because they were part of sports. You knew the soccer guys, you knew these guys, whatever. But now, like with boxing, it's become so saturated that you do have your stars, but there's so many and so much going on.
I think that's how MMA was early on. It was so kind of spread out. You had the Japanese organizations, you had, the US was developing. And so a lot of the guys, early guys got their starts in Japan before the UFC came about. And I think you'll like that one. Ken Shamrock was one of the first guys to develop a team to train together in the US. So, and a lot of those guys are still, they're not still fighting, but they're still around. So they're interviewed in this documentary, Guy Mezger and a lot of guys. So they show you a lot of those early 94 era.
Mm.
So it's some good history there.
Well, I still, and we had this discussion between the first and fifth shot.
Uh-huh.
We were talking about, I still believe
Yeah.
that there are traditional martial artists
Yeah.
who are not in the game, because if you do follow the true principles of martial arts, you would not do that. So because of, I'm always suspect the older I've gotten, people say, oh, well, he's the best, or they're the best, or whatever. But let me just give one explanation.
Yeah.
I studied martial arts different times.
Yeah.
And the only time it ever clicked for me was Aikido.
Yeah.
And the reason was that we were at the end where climbing stopped.
Yeah.
And I had to do something. So I trained at the Japanese Cultural Center in Chicago, which is the sister school of the headquarters of Aikido in Tokyo.
Yeah.
And it's also the association that Steven Seagal is a part of. In fact, even Michael Rooker, the actor, showed up at these. In fact, he had become part of Aikido after Above the Law.
Yeah, and
he was in the scene.
Steven Seagal is considered, I mean, was he the first American to be?
He was the first American. There's so much bullshit about this guy. I can't, you don't know what to read, but there is a fact that he did have a school in Japan, and these are facts.
Yeah, I think he was the first American to kind of be given some type of credibility outside of Japan and all that. Well, so he has legitimacy.
When you watch, go back to Above the Law.
Yeah.
And the opening sequence where they're in the dojo.
Yeah.
Those are his students.
Yeah.
And I can't think of this producer, but he went on to start CAA, Creative Artists Agency.
Okay, yeah.
Big time guy.
Biggest.
You know who? So
yeah,
he was either taking classes, or he had an assistant or someone who was taking classes. So he went and saw the class. He went ahead and said he set up the board of the studio. And I think Warner Brothers did his first couple, a big studio did his first couple movies. And he did an exhibition, and it was like they stopped it. It was so brutal.
And that's what is that what got him?
They signed them from them. And the crazy thing is, there's a restaurant scene, and we were doing the rough up. We were doing the rough. And so we came down, and the cops are everywhere on the street, and then there's the caterings there. And we started, we're just hanging out with the cops. We're like, who's in this movie? And they said, Steven Seagal. We're like, what the fuck is that? It's like, we didn't even know who anybody is. But what's funny? When you see that film, you start going through David Mamet, all the Untouchables, all the films. Everybody you see in that movie are Chicago actors on the side, and they're in all the Chicago things. So I got into it. Yeah, as everything I do.
As a lot of people did. I came up in traditional martial arts too with Taekwondo. I did that for 6 years or so, from my middle school to high school. And so did a lot of other friends of mine. So,
I studied that Taekwondo also in high school, my senior year.
Yeah.
And truth, at that time, I could almost do splits. That was before
muscle. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I was really, and when I took, so let me go back to keto. So I studied at this place, and I would go and sit and do the Zen in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then I would, they would have breakfast. It would be rice and like hard-boiled eggs and whatever. And then they do training. I would go to work.
Yeah.
And then I would come home. I would come and take night classes there. And what they would do is they one of the guys who's one of the teachers was like an Italian commando guy. Like he was from the Italian, more tough things. And his background was Shotokan karate with Aikido. So his classes were just, you're defending strikes. They just tried to beat the crap out of you. And then they would bring in the lady who would have Taekwondo, and they would just kick the crap out of you. But it would just be so that you would adapt to anything. So my question is this. So after about a year, I got a call and said, hey man, we're going back to the mountains. I said, okay, everyone, let's go. But at that point, right before turning over, it's the first time, and it never happened in Taekwondo, that I didn't think. So in other words, whatever you threw at me, it just happened. I don't know what, and it's the first time now. I didn't take 3 classes a week. I was taking
Yeah.
10 classes a week, and I was
Yeah.
into it to the max.
Yeah.
In fact, I could not, I was in it so much I could barely lift weights.
Mm.
And they would do this training once a month.
You sound like a Joe Rogan to me. And since he had almost a similar background where he did Taekwondo from high school to his early 20s, like hardcore, like it was all he could focus on. Ended up becoming, I think, best in his state as like a teen in the teenage. And
oh no, my Taekwondo was only just 1 year.
okay,
but it was 5 days a week.
But obsessively, that's what I'm talking about. The obsession,
I'm
like
obsessive
that.
with whatever I do.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, that's just you saw it on Saturday.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're not, don't mess around.
Yeah.
But there was that moment. Okay, there was that moment of not thinking, and the truth is,
like a natural reaction.
yeah,
like
I
just instant reaction.
So
yeah.
even now, I really don't fear anybody up
Yeah.
close.
Yeah.
I don't. And if you have a knife or whatever, you're going to kill me. Yeah, but I'm going to rip your ear off. I mean, you're never
Yeah.
going to forget me. If you have a gun, it's a different thing. But man, I don't know. I still remember a lot of the things. The truth is, going back to the flexibility
Yeah.
that I was talking to you about earlier, that all that my flexibility all does come out of martial arts.
Yeah.
And it's the polymetric, or I don't know the right words, or movement. But anyway, so those days are gone. I have to think now. Point is this: if you develop an MMA fighter with the mentality that they're not calculating, that they're just becoming like Bruce Lee said, like water or
Yeah.
fluid, because he took a very traditional martial art, Wing Chun, right?
Yeah.
Which is very confined,
Yeah.
correct?
And took from like Western
translated it,
boxing,
and he took
from
the best of everything. But yeah, he didn't have to think.
yeah.
Boxers,
Even his martial
is
arts.
that the difference in a
Do.
brawler and a fighter? Then maybe
What in terms of the
you just taking what
spontaneity?
well, brawler being you just take what if someone throws something at you, because it seems like when I watch the MMA,
Yeah.
and the only two I didn't watch the heavy guys. We were outside and we were
Yeah.
having great discussions. But the first couple fights, it seemed like they were not fluid in that they had taken not the spiritual, but there's something in martial arts that goes where people see shit behind them and to the peripheral becomes very more valid. Is there a martial artist that would be like that?
The first.
Does that make sense what I'm saying? I'm just saying from
No,
my
well,
own experience,
Yeah.
I didn't think, oh, if he throws it, like even now as a boxer, when I trained for Golden Gloves and when I fought, I just was too calculated. I didn't get it. And plus, I'm not a mad person. So in other words, I like people.
Yeah.
Now, if you lay hands on me or you hurt a friend,
Yeah.
like if someone came in your house and we were there and they hurt your wife, you can imagine that I could be very ferocious.
Yeah.
And you see me at work, very serious.
Yeah.
And when I'm but it's different. After that year of totally putting myself into this, and I did go up 2 or 3 belts, but I didn't care about belts. I was there every day. And I didn't think. So in other words, as an example, I worked on crews, man, where people were, I mean, dude, we beat up, we fought, we had fun. Yeah. And plus we're part of a big church and community type of situation. Yeah. But people would come at me, I would just throw them all over the place. Yeah. And it was like, I wasn't thinking. So if you take the spiritual out of the sport, then you become more, you're using physicals that are I don't know how to put this in. All I'm saying is that if you become too calculated, wouldn't it be better to be able to absorb all incoming attacks and not be thinking, oh, this guy's going to throw a right, but just be more fluid?
That probably separates the greats from the rest.
Okay. Well, so then you're talking about, Pierre would be one of those people.
Because but those guys put a lot of preparation. They do a lot of study. They do a lot of
Okay, but see, if you're studying, let me
Yeah.
ask you a question. If you're studying physically, the human body is emotions, it's spiritual, and it's physical. It's all
Yeah.
together. I mean,
Yeah.
whether a person is a belief in afterlife or not, there's obviously a presence that leaves the body when it dies. Or even dogs, whatever, everything, So there's something there that, when I think of martial arts, I really, in my mind, you either go back to India or China.
Yeah.
Because it kind of crosses over there. And
what I think is that, because I know you very much appreciate the traditional martial arts, and so do I. And I think a lot of the
no. I'm not saying that it's better. I'm saying there's an element that if you brought into
there
this
is,
would
though,
change your level.
No, I don't know if it will change the level of the athlete or the fight itself. I think if you were to maybe watch it more often, you will see that a lot of these fighters have and do come from traditional martial arts. And when they are in the cage, they will oftentimes show, they'll bow. They'll, after a fight, they'll both bow down in the middle of the cage and kind of be there for a while, talking to each other. One will like bow to the feet of another fighter after, even if he beats them. And so a lot of times they'll show respect. A lot of guys don't like the trash talkers because they don't have that traditional honor, respect kind of culture. So they
Great question for you. Well, wait, let me just say this one thing.
Yeah.
You're right. I'm not versed in MMA, and my viewership obviously is probably, without you, I wouldn't be having discussions about it. But I am very fascinated about it. I'm fascinated because of obviously the physicality, the fitness.
Yeah.
But I just kept, when I listened to the MC or whatever you call
the commentators,
even Joe Rogan, there was a lot of words about calculation and about fight plans and different things.
Yeah, because I think at that level, you're fighting against another elite fighter that they all have plans, and they're all looking to implement their game plan, and sometimes their game plans are very similar. So like the first fight I think we saw with two big guys, I think it was Thiago Santos and Ratchet. They're like two big dudes. One was Slovakian.
No, the first one we saw was the guys, and the guy looked like the Punisher dude.
Oh yeah, they were smaller. They're the smaller weight, but they're the main one on the pay-per-view. Mm-hmm. Two big guys, and they're very calculated. They're very almost like they didn't really trade a lot. Those guys were very similar in their style and their approach. So a lot of times when that happens, strategies clash, and you end up with a boring fight, or you don't, get much action, and because they are basically a number one, number two of that division. So next guy is probably going to get a title shot. So I think a lot of things were, and plus both of those guys have that one punch knockout. They'll hit you from any angle type of power. So, which not everybody possesses. But no, as far as the traditional martial arts aspect, the honor, the spirituality, a lot of that exists. And I think if you check out the documentary Choke, you'll see a lot of it. Even though Rickson, who his game wasn't well-rounded at that time, was so good and good enough in other areas that he can get by, and he was so spiritual. They show a lot of he was very into movement and breathing exercises and honor and very just like, a serious dude. So I think you'll really appreciate that documentary, and it gives you a more of a closer look into the early days of MMA, you would say, mixed martial arts, and a look into the Brazilian jiu-jitsu culture. So I think you'll like that one.
So would you? Yes, I am fascinated, and it's something really interesting, because it's funny. I moved to this job because I really thought about going to Krav Maga, which is down the street.
Yeah,
but which is makes more sense in my line.
In your line of work, definitely.
So
now, and we're talking about the techniques of traditional martial arts guys, and maybe a traditional martial artist coming in. They're like George St. Pierre came from Shotokan Karate, and if you watch that thing I sent you, it shows his early days in Shotokan karate.
Let me ask you a question.
yeah.
What would be the number one
Yeah.
martial art that has influenced MMA? So in other words, what would be the most substantial background that is translated into victories of MMA? Is it jiu-jitsu?
It was, I think the
boxing,
thing that,
whatever?
I think that the thing that changed the game, the one that changed the game was jiu-jitsu. And then you go back
And
to,
who was the person?
you go back to UFC 1 with Hoist Gracie.
Yeah, okay.
Because you had in that first tournament, and I think you could find that first tournament on YouTube, and I'll send it to you. You had sumo, you had boxing, you had karate, you had you name it. Savant, I think is that French one, French martial art. You had that in there. You had
It's a heavy kicking. I think it's a heavy kicking martial art.
Yeah, you had American wrestling. You had a bunch of you had Muay Thai, and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and Hoist Gracie won the first 4 tournaments. I mean, and it was because anytime those guys went into it engage, he just either slip a punch or grab a hold of them in some way and took them down. And once they got on the ground, a lot of those guys were fish out of water. It's like, so
well, Bruce Lee said the same thing. If a wrestler could take a punch, you can't beat him.
Yeah.
And the traditional jiu-jitsu, going back to Japan and the samurai, was the military.
Yeah.
Was the military martial art, and it was not just that. It also, because there's certain styles of jiu-jitsu do have some strikes in it, I believe.
Yeah. There are even tournaments.
Right?
I've been to a few tournaments, and I think you'll like them. And once things pick up again, we'll go to one. It's a combat jiu-jitsu. So
yes, Aikido kind of comes out of that, believe it or not.
Yeah, they do jiu-jitsu, but with open palm strikes, and so basically to help set up, force guys openings, and you force openings, and you get guys to kind of.
Well, I mean the thing with Aikido is, if you don't attack me, I just stand there waiting, because if you don't, and that's why a lot of people, traditionalists, kind of got after Seagal.
Yeah,
because he took it and morphed it, and if you look at his stuff, there's massive strikes.
Oh yeah.
In his films or whatever. But anyway, it is fascinating, and I am, because of you, I've become more and more interested in it, and I'm going to watch those, and I'll post those links for anybody else who wants to catch up on that, because I love the idea. When I moved here, I went, or not, I don't know, I did something. I signed up for Shaolin Kung Fu right here in San Gabriel. Now, the guy who was teaching was from the temple.
Okay.
There was no English.
Yeah.
So I tried hanging with this class.
Yeah.
And there's like 40 and 50-year-old Chinese women that are just whipping my ass. I mean, they're just running up and down. And I'm like, I can't even get out of my car.
Yeah.
I'm so unflexible. But it was really interesting because it goes back to the wushu and the flexibility and the whole martial art. Yeah. But I find it to be really interesting. And the reason that it's significant, the next night after leaving the party, I had to go, when you were sleeping and everybody else, I had to go paint. But I watched considered the fight of the century, Muhammad Ali.
Yeah.
In Madison Square with Joe Frazier.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting because, so after I saw you, I've asked every single person at work, are you into MMA? What do you know? What do you think? And it's a generational thing. The older people were schooled in boxing like this, fight here. So we look at, and back in this day in the 70s, the heavyweight championship of the heavyweight champion of the world was the top sports figure of the world of anything. No one.
Yeah.
No one could eclipse Muhammad Ali or whoever was the heavyweight champ. And it was singular, like you said, with UFC. So anyway, that was something I really watched. It was the anniversary this weekend, by the way.
Okay.
And so it was, I mean, when all this nostalgia comes up, it's like, oh, I remember this.
Have you seen Ali versus Inoki?
No.
So Muhammad Ali goes over to Japan.
I remember the spectacle. This? Yes.
He takes on Inoki, who was like
a cat wrestler. Why? Just off the cuff.
Yeah.
Is that why that's in goes in the Rocky with the wrestler?
Possibly. Yeah, I think so.
I mean, that's way after that happened.
Yeah. Because
Rocky started from Muhammad Ali, Chuck Wepner's story. So I wonder do you think that's part of it?
It could
An
be.
idea of it?
I'm sure they took some inspiration from it. And if you look at now Inoki, I think was a catch wrestler / professional wrestler. So he wasn't necessarily he wasn't a mixed martial artist. He was like he was more of had a grappling base, I guess, in a way. So he takes on Muhammad Ali.
What was his background again? Was he a
I think,
or
no? I think he was catch wrestling and professional wrestler. He's a professional wrestler too.
Well, that pretty much even links it closer
Yeah.
now.
so you have Muhammad Ali, and then he's bouncing around. I'll send you the video. I'm sure it's on YouTube. And then Inoki is kind of like dancing around him, and then he's just doing these diving leg kicks, and really hitting Ali. So he wouldn't give Ali a chance to try to punch him, and he would just kind of dive and do like a leg kick, and Ali will try to like he'll take it, but that's pretty much most of the match. I'll send it to you. I'll find it. It's a good one.
No, I thinking back, I remember the spectacle of it, though. Coming from an Irish family, it was looked down upon in the boxing. Do you know what?
Now back to the traditional martial arts and mixed martial arts. There is a lot of traditional martial arts that you will find in mixed martial arts, because a lot of these guys.
So when you look, the reason I say this, certain martial arts have specialties. Yeah, Taekwondo
and you have
kicking, correct?
You have that in here. You have a lot of guys who are specialists, like, and have reached the top. There's Lyoto Machida, who comes from a karate-based family. He came into the UFC with a karate-based style. I mean, he stands like straight up karate.
Yeah, like kata.
I'll send you his stuff. He was one of my favorites for the longest. But he also came up learning sumo and learning Brazilian jiu-jitsu, because he's half Brazilian, half Japanese. So he came over, won the title, and his stand-up is almost primarily a karate, Shotokan karate style based stand-up, but he has all this other sumo stance, going side to side, and the Brazilian jiu-jitsu to back it up too. So
your champions in MMA then are obviously cross-trained.
Yeah,
if you come from a specialty, you have to pull in other stuff. What would you say would be the number one aspect that they have to add to the game? Would it be the grappling?
It would be the wrestling, at least. Because if you
wrestling,
because if you could take a guy down, or you can even avoid being taken down, you can keep it to where you need to be. If let's say you're a jiu-jitsu guy and you don't know wrestling, it's going to be very hard for you to take down certain guys that know how to avoid being taken down. So you got to stand with them, and then you better be able to stand with them. And if you're a stand-up fighter, a kickboxer, or a karate guy, and you don't know how to keep yourself off the ground, then you're going to have a long night. And it's just that type of thing.
I would think that from growing up and watching martial art movies, it seemed like there's millions of guys who could win the championship. I mean, they can, you watch those movies, these guys, they jump through the air, they can take on 50, 60 guys. I think they're missing out. I think they need agents. I'm going to go over there and start bringing them over. No. Okay. Last question on this, but it is fascinating. So if you take the martial art,
you'll see a lot of those techniques. You'll see the hand catching. You'll see the over the top hand catch. You'll see it.
Was there anybody with strictly an Aikido background who came in there?
No. And I don't think you can necessarily with like a traditional martial arts, let's say, even just where you don't have anything else to back it up. And even if you're in that setting, like an Aikido, you can take elements of Aikido, and that's like kind of what Bruce Lee was preaching. His Jeet Kune Do is kind of a form of what mixed martial arts is today. It's obviously evolved from that, but you can take elements of Aikido, you can take elements of Wing Chun, you could take elements of Kung Fu and implement them into your game. And a lot of fighters do.
So question for you. If you go to some of the, I don't know all the martial arts, but it seemed like I'm ignorant of this, but it seems like many of the systems that are from China, Shaolin Kung Fu, whether northern or southern stance, these really seem to incorporate every single element for victory that you would need in MMA. So in other words, not only is it the hand moves, It's the moves to keep from getting down. It's also the flexibility and moves to come off the ground.
Yeah.
And if you really look at like even elements of Wing Chun and this, I mean, really, that is all hand moves. Now, I know we keep going back on this, so I'm sure there is someone. I believe there is someone in the traditional world that would never do this. They're up on some mountain somewhere in the world, but is at a level that they're so well trained. It's not even well trained. It's remember what I said. I did not think. I think these people that do it for 10 or 20 years, like, okay, Pierre, if I came up and threw a punch at him, he would not. He would automatically jump into that, and it's over because he's been so trained. It's almost like, you know, like drive. Do you drive a stick with a car ever?
I've attempted a couple of times. I'm not very good at it, so now I gave up on that.
I learned in college from my girlfriend. She had a Beetle, but once you learn that, I got in a car the other day that I had to move, and it was like no thinking. So when you get to that level, then you're not thinking, you're not calculating. I think these guys that are the greats, they just go out and take what comes to them and do what they can.
Yeah, I think. I think.
Do you think overthinking can keep away from your ability to fight sometimes?
I think. Well, it depends. I mean, I think we think about how much like it goes back to how, like, even if you look at Bruce Lee, I don't think Bruce Lee would have done with his skill set would have done well in MMA if he didn't incorporate other aspects of fighting.
Man, he was so quick. It would really be well. Also, the mandates of the rules for him.
Yeah.
So in other words, in the era that he trained,
you
know, joints and different elements that would be a part of his crushing you. We're not part of it.
I think traditional martial arts to an untrained or even a semi-trained person will, in a close quarter kind of thing, will on an everyday situation will help you out and get you out of bad situations and maybe even get a victory. But if you're put into an element with another trained, highly trained athlete, skilled fighter, and especially a mixed martial artist, and especially and if that person even is a specialist in a certain area, then I think you're gonna have a hard time. Basically what I'm saying is that I don't think a traditional martial arts, and it goes back to even what Bruce Lee was putting out there, and that you have to get away from styles, you have to get away from certain things, you have to take what works and do away with what doesn't. And
he went from this, the pole, out.
But even then, his limit has been surpassed already, because he hasn't a guy like who exists today at the top level, and like say UFC, Bruce Lee wouldn't hang. He just wouldn't. I don't think a traditional martial artist, if you take a Shotokan
Bruce
karate
Lee
guy,
is a guy that had a punching board in his car.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
If you take a Tibetan monk who is in whatever, I don't know, what are they, where the wing, like, you know, some type of kung fu or chain, you know.
Well, Tibet, it would be Chinese based, but they wouldn't say that over there because
he would do okay against maybe some lower level guys. But if you get somebody who can, you wouldn't. I don't think that person exists. Basically, your theory that somebody exists out there, I don't think that person exists. And I think it's been proven already, and we've seen it already in UFC 1. We've seen it in UFC 1.
There's a humility factor with martial arts, traditional martial arts, and we've discussed it with the bowing and whatever. And we would never know if this person exists because, you know, out of how many billion people on the earth?
Yeah, but then it's kind of like you're waiting for that one person. And if you take a traditional martial artist, I've been I've been watching this sport grow for the past 20 years, and even before that, caught up on the last 10, and I've seen traditional martial arts be exposed, and because they have holes in those games, and it goes back to what Bruce Lee said: there's certain things you cannot defend against, and even if you take a high level,
but there
wrestler,
are certain styles that do cover everything.
That's mixed martial arts.
No, I agree, but there are certain traditional styles
they'll take you a good amount of
original
yeah.
jiu-jitsu. Okay, going back to the samurai was not just the actual wrestling or grappling.
Yeah.
It was the kicks, the strikes, the sword. It was a full military complement, so that whatever came to you. I don't know a lot of the martial arts, but I do know there are the elements of Chinese and wushu going into kung fu.
Yeah.
The reason it takes 10 years to master it is that it takes forever to learn all the styles to combat, so you don't have to think. So I think what would be interesting is that maybe someone start a series, because I think if someone started a series where you brought in some of the traditional, not in the championship fights, not in the MMA, but I think some of these competitions on a level going back to where kickboxing kind of came in, we've been removed from that for a while. It might be really interesting. Some of these fights would if you got some traditional martial art people, from different countries, you might find a bigger audience. So I'm talking financially, but I think there would be a draw to see this again because it's been removed for a while.
It's very well. I'm gonna have to counter that in that it's been removed for a while because it's been done already. It's been done.
Well, at the beginning when it was filtered out, correct?
I think it was self-filtered out. I think it was a natural evolution.
Okay,
I think what you're seeing now is the most complete martial artist that has ever existed on this planet. And it depends on who the fighter is you're looking at, because obviously everybody has their own style and comes for certain traditional. But when you have a guy who can, he can strike with the best, with the best of the best. He can grapple with the best of the best, and he has an all-encompassing game on top of athleticism and our cardio, and can handle himself in any given situation. I think right now, if you're really looking at it, right now is the most evolved martial artist that we've ever had on this planet. And you can go back to a traditional martial art. You could go to a kickboxer. You could go. There's karate combat. There's glory kickboxing. There's boxing, world championship boxing. There's Shotokan karate and taekwondo tournaments that are still going on where you have style versus similar style versus similar style. And that works fine. And if you take a mixed martial artist against a specialist like that, they'll probably have a hard time, and most likely that specialist is going to win. But if you take, and I've seen it many times, and it still happens to this day, you take a specialist and you put them into the octagon, what they do in their arena doesn't necessarily work, because like I mentioned Floyd Mayweather, for example, and I've seen it, I could name a bunch of them. You could take a high-level jiu-jitsu, high-level kickboxers, and I've seen them all get beat at their own game. And sometimes it's not even against the best.
How would Steven Seagal do in his prime?
He would. What do you know my answer to that? He'll get smashed in 30 seconds.
I'm talking about before movies when he lived in Japan.
No, he'll get smashed.
Do you know
I guarantee. We've had this conversation. I think in a setting and like he would get smashed. He would just get smashed. It depends on, even if you put him up against a striker in mixed martial arts, mid-level, he will get smashed.
Interesting.
This is my opinion.
No, he beats up a lot of people in the movies, dude.
But this is because I've you know how much I love combat sports. I've seen it. I've seen the sport evolve in the last 20 years, and I caught myself up on the 10 before that, of where styles started fighting styles. And I've seen traditional. I've seen every UFC. I've seen even even their own subcategories of traditional martial arts or whatever, whatever it may be, I've seen it done, and I've seen up until this point right now is the complete package what you have right now, and it'll get even better than it is right now because the game is constantly evolving. There's techniques that are brought in from traditional martial arts still to this day that are being implemented, and then they end up being countered. And what I'm saying is that if you take a traditional martial artist and he might get over certain guys, but eventually the game will catch up to him pretty quick, and the holes in his game, and that traditional martial artist will have to adapt.
Okay, so how would Royce Gracie do today?
We've seen it. I've seen it done. I've seen it. He fought Matt Hughes in 2008 at the Staples Center, and Matt Hughes was kind of like the second generation. He was a top welterweight champ, longtime champ before George St. Pierre. He actually St. Pierre took it from him. Royce Gracie came out of a 3 or 4 year retirement, and he got finished within the first round.
Well, it's interesting you said that because that's what Joe Montana said to Tom Brady. He said, "Don't retire." He goes, because you can never bring it back.
No. But the thing is, like, well, Royce Gracie, who was,
and how old was he when he lost?
It was in his mid 30s, 40s, early 40s, maybe, when he lost. Because he did his tournaments and then he stepped away. He stepped away from competition.
When he came in and became the winner, was it because it was a style that they had not learned to fight against, or was it
because
different?
no one had defense against it. And then that's what I'm saying. We've seen it done is with traditional martial arts, is that we've seen traditional martial artists come in, and those holes have all been closed. Those guys have all had to adapt, and those styles have all kind of had to been, altered, and like basically what Bruce Lee has said, taken what works and then discard what doesn't. And there's a lot that doesn't, but there's a lot that does, and it's still constantly evolving. Like the guys currently fighting right now at top level are beating right now. There's a transitional generational thing right now. There's a lot of guys that are losing right now to the younger guys, and those guys were the younger guys at one point. And I've seen those guys come in, and those guys are getting, and they're not even that old. They're 30 something, 35. And these new guys are just, their techniques are just on point. They came up learning mixed martial arts, and then build upon that. Whereas a lot of the guys before them had to come from traditional, adapt their game. And then you got guys who grew up watching them train nothing but mixed martial arts, and then built on top of that. And then you're going to have, I say 10 years from now, these new guys are going to become, the names to build the new guys off of. And techniques are all constantly changing. Right now, the big thing right now is calf kicks and low kicks. Like, it's a certain kind of kick. Low kicks have always been there, but calf kicks especially. Or it's a new trend. It's a new trend. I don't know. That a lot of guys are doing because it shut the leg down. You're the calf, once you smack the calf a bunch of times. That's what happened to Connor, basically.
Listen, this is your field. Yeah. I always lean more toward maybe supernatural or spiritual involvement to raise to other levels. I still think there is that person out there. I think it's like trying to say Michael, whoever's the best basketball player, there's people who, well, that's different because you can't be that great without being in the sport and doing whatever. Yeah. But I'm just saying, and there's talented people.
Like the guys who came up early on, like in the 90s, they had to adapt to it growing into a sport. So they had to kind of adapt because, obviously the rules started changing. Like you were asking, how come this guy doesn't punch him in the balls or this and that? Like that kind of stuff.
They wear cups though, I would have hoped.
Yeah, but that kind of stuff kind of went away in the early 90s because one guy did it. So they're like, you can't, and they get to get that shit out of here. Or,
well, no, I agree that.
Yeah. So it's adapted into a sport. Then they had to do rounds, and then I'll try to find you the documentary where it goes through the whole the whole start to finish, because it's really interesting how they because these states started trying to shut the UFC down and all these other things, these leagues, and so they had to go into court to fight to make this sport what it is today, and tweak the rules here and there, add time clocks, add rounds, add judging and criteria and all this other stuff. So
well, yeah, and it's also made the market. I mean,
yeah, and I think they've done a very good job of it. It's
well, I'm going to spend more time. I'm going to watch that stuff because I am interested. I do love, obviously, the traditional.
And I think you'll like it. I think I know, coming from a
well, obviously,
background,
even the training is different.
Yeah.
Even the physical training, the work capacity loads, everything is different from 20, 30 years ago.
And I tell you, I can point, if you want an example of certain traditional martial artists that have done very well, I can give you those names, and I think I've given you a couple. But even then, they've had to adapt their game because, they may have found success in a certain area, but someone exploited that, and then if they didn't close that hole in their game and adapt, then,
well, I mean, the thing is to be super great. I mean, to be in traditional arts, you're looking at a lifetime of achievement. I mean, really, and growth. So by the time you would get to a certain level, you could not compete physically with the, to box 2 rounds like an amateur or Golden Gloves is forever. And these guys doing 5-minute rounds, and wrestling is just taxes the body. I mean, when they're on the ground, their calorie burn is just phenomenal on every level, that even the anxiety raising it up. So
when you have a whole 5-minute round, or even a 25-minute fight where they're going from the stand up, transitioning to the takedown attempts, transitioning to the ground, back up and back down again. And it's like, you see the athleticism, you see the cardio needed. But I think coming from a traditional martial arts background, such as yourself, or even appreciating the traditional styles, I think you will find what you're looking for in this sport, because outside looking in, it's very much like, it seems like, it's maybe one certain type of fighting, and or it's more of a brawl, but
it has changed, because it seems like it has slowed down a little bit for some reason in my mind, or it's just that I've gotten older or whatever, but that's what I feel like. I feel like it's and
now there's certain cards are different, like matchups. A lot of times the styles.
Yeah, I need to see fights some more, and
because one card is super exciting. These fights are back and forth. Techniques are being thrown everywhere, and some guys are getting knocked out. Their blood. It depends. A card to card, fight to fight, fighter to fighter, weight class to weight class. It really you don't know what you're gonna get half the time. But in terms of the level of excitement in the fight, but as far as the technique and level of competition you're gonna get, you're gonna really enjoy it. And I sent you some of the Japanese promotions that were in the late 90s, early 2000s. Yeah. Those were some of a lot of the greats came out of there too, and they were big in terms of spectacles. They had these giant arenas. They fought mostly in a boxing ring style, and they had it was just grand entrances and grand ceremonial stuff, and it's just, when the main event was over, confetti flowed down. It was just amazing stuff. And then you can even go back and watch Brazilian Vale Tudo, which is no holds barred, everything goes. I could show you a Chuck Liddell fight, because he had.
I'm familiar with him.
Yeah, because
he was on Entourage too.
when he went to Brazil early in his career, because he was more primarily I think he was Kempo karate, and then he did some kickboxing, and then he went down to get some experience in mixed martial arts down in Brazil, and he was going in bare knuckle Vale Tudo fights where you can kick, punch, knee, and they had nets to catch people from falling out from the bottom that wrapped around. So if you got caught into those nets, they could still beat the hell out of you. And in Japan, the rules were different. They had 2 rounds. They had a 10-minute round and a 5-minute round, and then they judged the fight in its entirety. And
10 minutes, dude.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
And in that promotion, and a lot of those promotions, they allowed knees to the head, kicks to a downed opponent, punches. So it was a lot more brutal.
Well, Muay Thai fights too. They allow some knees and different severe strikes, or did in the old days at least.
Yeah. So I can go on and on and on and on. And I do.
No, it's fascinating, and like I said, everything, I like to know what's it about, and just with my background, the last note on Aikido, one thing I did learn from that is that if you do use it on a person, that person either has a broken bone or has massive joint. Yeah. It's not a strike. You're hurt. The person's going to be hurt for a long time. It's a few times that I got thrown. Anyway, the last thing. So they do this month, right? Yeah. At the end of the month, they do this, and we do you do the traditional sword and all the katana and all the different things. Yeah. They do this thing called 10,000 strokes. Yeah. And that's what you do. And there's a pile of sweat. Yeah. A puddle, because you can't, and the Aikido gi and judo gis, they're heavy duty. They're not karate. I mean, they're for throwing and whatever. And it was a real fascinating information. But then they were smart, because they brought the people in to train the strikers, the kickers, and everything, and that made it more of a complete art. Aikido came out of World War II. Yeah. Because the Americans banished all martial arts. Okay. And all they could have was Aikido, and that's where Olympic judo came from also. Yeah.
Well, even like a martial art like capoeira. Have you know capoeira?
Yeah, it's from Brazilian. Dancing kind of more.
It was dancing. So similar situation where
is that what Michael Jackson did?
Yeah. So the slaves in Brazil had to hide their martial art in dance, because they were not allowed to train. So their movements were practicing their martial arts and their kicks and their technique. And
it's kind of like watching Tai Chi.
And Tai Chi too.
It's slow, but they're all strikes and blocks and movements.
So you can take elements from those martial arts. You can take elements from Tai Chi. You can take elements from capoeira, from Aikido, and implement them in your game in a mixed martial arts setting. And it sometimes it does work, and it can work over time, and maybe even continue to still work. But it'll be very difficult for those traditional styles to just go into a setting like this with a complete fighter at this level in a current time, and have championship level success. It's very, very,
I agree that any traditional, 100%, any traditional martial artist that would go into this is going to struggle and lose. Yeah. But I still believe that there are martial artists that are on a different level that wouldn't come in, and maybe that they wouldn't compete, but I say that they would be on a different level depending on their background, just because I think there's always a level that goes above.
But I think they will, and my counter argument, I guess, to that was, and we go back and forth on this, but is that
we've been going since Saturday on this.
They will have success, and they will find success, but it has a ceiling. There's a ceiling to that success, because they will be forced to adapt.
Or they would, exactly.
They'll be forced to adapt.
No matter, okay, we agree on this whole thing. No matter what, because that's just part of life. That's civilization. So you adapt or you die. So I agree.
Yeah.
See, it only took 4 days to get there. It's like, what are we, Congress?
No, because I love the traditional martial arts guys, and I'm telling you, Lyoto Machida is one of my favorites. I mean, I love that guy, man, and he was straight up karate. Goes in with the gi,
though, right?
Yeah, goes in with the gi. I mean, straight up karate style. I mean, I'll send you when he knocked out Randy Couture. He knocked out Randy Couture with a crane kick. Ooh. Like Karate Kid style crane kick, and he did that right after
he popped it right in his face, didn't he?
Yeah, he knocked his tooth out. Yeah, basically retired Randy Couture. But I've seen Lyoto Machida has been beat up, knocked out, choked out, and won multiple titles and still competing. I've seen him fight a
Would
bunch
you,
of times.
okay, so question would be
Yeah.
for you. Do you think that fitness,
Mhm.
do you feel like it's skill? But if someone can just keep taking the beating and doesn't get put down, eventually they wear out the other guy. So fitness is a big level in MMA.
Fitness,
correct?
Yeah, fitness, durability, but also
Cardio, work
mental.
capacity,
A lot of it's
recovery from the burn
Mhm.
as within you going.
Yeah, but a lot of it goes into mentality, like
Oh,
especially the
who can
greats.
suffer? Who can
Yeah,
suffer?
especially
I agree.
the greats,
I agree.
because you have like a Kamaru Usman who's top of the welterweight division right now, primarily a wrestler, big, strongest dude. You can just tell is mentally above his competitor. He already has his competitor beat in his head, and that's a lot of times a lot of the greats do, and a lot of the guys that try to beat the greats, and why would they end up losing? Because they lose before they even get into the cage.
That goes back to Amadeus.
Yeah.
Because that mentality is what, that's Tom Brady, that's Michael Jackson,
Exactly, yeah.
Marlon Brando. You know what I mean? These are, these are the people. It's J.K. Rowling's, not having a job and writing this book. I mean, there's this level where people just go, and I agree 100% with this. I find the traditional, maybe because I'm old, but the MMA is fascinating. And once this whole pandemic thing goes, interested in going to fights.
I will take you all that.
And I'm also interested to doing a tour of some of the main fighting gyms in LA. I would be fascinated to go, because I love the concept of the training. And I think that's what I appreciate also.
You'll like I think you'll find everything that you would want to look for: the spirituality, the traditional, the specialists. The training.
Question for you too now: is there a movie that you like that's a martial art based story or movie that you like that you've seen before? I'm not talking about documentaries. I'm talking about a Hollywood production. The only one I've ever familiar with is Warrior with Nick Nolte.
Oh, in terms of MMA related?
Yeah, like some
or jiu-jitsu related or whatever.
Yeah, is there anything that I love Above the Law just because of the traditional Steven Seagal, Aikido, and mainly because of the opening dojo scene. Is what hooked me. So, is there a movie in Hollywood that, like I said, Warrior is really my only one with the M that I know of?
Yeah, I mean, even that one, it's still like the fighting in there is somewhat realistic, but I don't know if MMA has really. I don't know if they translated so much into
this movie? A martial art movie, and it made the girl a star. She's a Latina lady.
Yeah.
Rodriguez or something. She did Girl Fight.
Oh, she did Girl Fight. Yeah.
And that was considered that's more boxing, right?
That was boxing. Yeah, that was boxing.
But I thought that was a pretty good movie myself, even though it's not that.
Which one I recommend that is a little, it's more of a jiu-jitsu based kind of movie. Takes liberties on certain like rules or realistic situations in terms of like a tournament. But one that I enjoyed though, the story was a Red Belt. I'll send you the link to it. It's got a lot of recognizable names and actors in it, and you'll recognize pretty much the entire cast. I like the movie. It's a pretty good martial arts movie, and it's somewhat MMA related, so I think you'll like it.
All right, it's very interesting.
Yeah,
I want to see it.
Let's talk about what we've been watching this week.
Yeah, I think next week we'll do.
We were. So for anybody listening or watching, we were going to talk about Coming to America 2 or even Coming to America 1, and then setting up Coming to America 2.
But we had to finish our debate from Saturday.
We had to come to a mutual understanding
agreement. Now, see, this is an example for politicians.
Yeah.
Okay. It only took us 4 days.
Yeah.
Not 60 years.
Because of for people who don't know, the first time we had this conversation, we were both, 3 beers and 5 shots in.
Well, no, that's not true. We started the conversation at 1 shot in and 1 beer, and then we were there Remember, I was there at
Oh
5
yes,
and
you
I
were.
left
Yes,
at
you did.
midnight.
You're right. You're right. You're
I
right.
left the work day later.
Yeah, but we
We
got
put in
really
a good
into
day
it
of work.
very late on. Yeah.
But we will discuss it. It's a cultural phenomenon, and I think it's a significant film to talk about. I have seen it. I'm not
Yeah.
going to make any comment on it, but it is also dealing with the times of today compared to the first one. So we will discuss both at the same time.
Yeah.
I saw the first one at the theater.
Yeah.
So for me, and growing up with Eddie Murphy and Saturday Night Live, and I love his outfits and
Yeah.
and I just like the dude. So that being said, we'll talk about this next week. So what have you watched, and give me one recommendation for me to watch?
One docu-series that I finished and I texted to you was Murder by Mormons. Let me see. Hold on one second.
Oh, yes. I didn't know what that meant, though.
Yeah, Netflix. So I'll get the exact title for you. Murder Among the Mormons. So it's a docu-series, and it basically takes place in 85.
Mhm.
And it focuses around there was just this it's a circulation in the Mormon world where a lot of collectors and a lot of Mormon old archival letters and papers, and that started to become its own little business. So you had a lot of these collectors that got into the Mormon business basically. And it focuses primarily on one collector, and basically he came up with a lot of the most high profile finds, and this all took place around 2 bombings that took place in Salt Lake City, that were targeted bombings that people died in. And
what year was that?
85.
Okay.
85, 86, I think. And so it pretty much intertwines the bombings with the collector world and the church itself. So it's a really good documentary.
And what is that on?
Netflix. It just came out.
Okay.
It's about a 4-part series, I think.
We'll write that down.
And it's very good. And I think it's really well done, and the way they tied it in at the end, it was great. That's one of my picks. And my second pick will probably be I don't know. I went back and watched a couple of old movies. I saw Contact with Jodie Foster, and I saw Uncle Ron. Oh no, Captain Ron with
Kurt
Russell.
I love that. That's I love that movie.
Yeah,
I saw it at the theater.
I saw it as a kid. I remember watching it as a kid.
That guy's so funny to me. He plays the same kind of dumb guy, but it's just like it works in everything.
Big
From
Trouble
Escape to
Little
New York all the way down to the one with Goldie Hawn where she gets amnesia. Overboard.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So Captain Ron, Captain Ron and Contact are my 2 picks for this week.
Who's the victim in Captain Ron?
Well, it's a family. You have Martin Short.
Martin Short, that's right.
Yeah, and his family. I guess an uncle of his dies, leaves a boat to him, and then he's got to sail it back, and the insurance company or whoever he's going to sell it to, enlist a local ship captain to kind of help him ship.
Great movie,
and it's
fun movie though.
It's a great movie. Yeah,
it's good fun.
So those are my picks for the week.
Well, I finished out the first season of Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In.
Okay.
And it is worth the watch. I mean, anybody who's historically knowledgeable about 1968, that was last year without the pandemic, but they had a war instead of the pandemic. So it was just the same kind of situation.
Yeah.
And the writing in this under those censors, and if you're smart and hear these jokes, it is so brilliant.
Yeah.
And it is just the people that had to be, I mean, it goes from Sally Field, Tim Conway, the president of the United States, just over and over and over people. And it's been wonderful. It's a great escapism.
Yeah.
I love sarcasm.
That's yeah.
It's really good. And then I did watch, as I discussed earlier, the fight of the century that was the anniversary.
Yeah, yeah.
It was phenomenal. I mean, the people, the celebrities in the stinking. Oh my gosh! I mean, it's like unbelievable, and it's the old Madison Square Garden. There's something very masculine and tough about that time of 1970. New York was tough.
It still is. That's still a highlight for any fighter going in. Even in the UFC, when they had their first event, or any fighter that fights in Madison Square Garden for the first time, you always hear it. It's just like a memorable moment for them. So yeah,
it's like walking in the second city or whatever. Basically, it's the magic, it's the vibe. And then, truth is, I went back and watched the first season of Downton Abbey.
Okay,
and that's the serialized show by Julian Fellows.
Did you ever watch the movie?
Truth, I did, but by then I was
out of it. Yeah.
It just didn't have the pull, but I think it's phenomenal. These British actors and Irish actors are just, have you seen it?
I've seen a little bit of it, but it did set the trend for a lot of shows now that you see. And
well, it's kind of a remake of the show Upstairs, Downstairs that was back in the early years. And also this guy, he's done a lot of stuff, but he wrote and won the Oscar for Gosford Park. Which is a great movie, almost like a murder mystery, and the stars that are in there. I mean, from Clive Owen, Philip, Maggie, everybody's Maggie Smith's wonderful movie. And anyway, I spent a lot of time, and I guess the last couple of weeks I've turned on some things that have just been really a disappointment, and normally you don't find that. Yeah. And so it's nice. It's always we always go back to our nostalgia and the shows, and my mom loved this show, and my mom, who's not doing well and really has lost her memory, just watching that, I remember how much she liked it, and we talked about it in the evenings. And really the British actors, these people who are so schooled, and it's, I told my wife I never thought I would want to, but I kind of want to go to. I mean, I always wanted to go to Ireland because of that's my family, but I really want to go to England because the history of the world is England. The more and more I think about it, it pretty much is what we have today. Every tradition we have probably came out of there, bad and good. So I have you been there?
I've never been there.
Did you go there if you had a chance?
Oh yeah. I think more and more as the years have gone on, like, you want to do Japan, you want to maybe go to Brazil, but I don't know, England and that, that whole.
Well, if you go England, France, Italy, you pretty much got the whole show.
Yeah, England, France, Italy, maybe even Spain.
They just took vacation years off of ruling the world.
maybe even go higher up to like a Ireland or Scotland or anything.
Well, I definitely would go to the towns, where my relatives are from, and I think hanging out in Northern Ireland, it was really interesting because U2, Bloody Sunday, that whole history and my history of growing up. But there's something very fascinating and I think a lot of it has to do even with history and Macbeth, and I've been drawn in through my wife.
Especially with England and France.
She's been there and Spain, she loved it. And I mean, Shakespeare is why we got what we got.
Yeah.
We're not even on the computer without this dude.
All right, man. It's a good I don't know if you need to go or if you're good.
Yeah, truth is, I get a chance now to go to work, which is just such a treat. The truth is, I'm thinking about just giving the money away to the, I'm just going to do this as a hobby.
Yeah.
But no, everything. I'm looking good. I'm looking forward to. We'll watch this show. Also, definitely once we start getting to this vaccinated type of thing, we'll definitely do some shows in person.
Yeah.
And love to bring some people in and get some feedback.
Yeah.
Because I think it would be very interesting also. But hey,
we could definitely do an in-person kind of
Oh, definitely.
Setup. So yeah.
I'm tired of this Zoom thing.
Yeah. So we'll definitely set something like that up soon. But hopefully soon.
All right. Well, everybody, thank you for listening. Look at our Instagram for what we got and have a great day.
All right, man. Thank you for everybody. Subscribe, all that. Like, share, and thank you all for joining us.